Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for a conversation about A Tree of Life, the film you just saw. We are so honored to have as guests the people responsible for making this very powerful film, and also some of the people that appear in the film. And I'd like to introduce you to them now now before we get going. The first person, and maybe you could just wave, is the director, Trish Adlesic. She is actually the director and producer of the film, and she's a Pittsburgh native who was at her childhood home with her father the day of the terrible attack at the synagogue. Her producing credits include Gasland and Gasland 2, films that expose the environmental devastation of fracking, and received an Academy Award nomination and won an Emmy. She also co-produced and co-directed the award-winning I Am Evidence about the alarming number of untested sexual assault kits in America, a film I highly recommend. Welcome, Trish.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next participant is Susan Margolin, who is also a producer of the film and a very dedicated supporter of the independent film community through her many endeavors. Her company, New Video, became a leading global force in independent home art entertainment. Through Docurama Films, a subsidiary of New Video, Susan championed more than 400 award-winning nonfiction films. She was honored by the PGA, Producers Guild of America, as one of the Digital 25 Leaders in Emerging Entertainment. In 2016, she launched St. Mark's Productions, a producer of A Tree of Life. Thank you, Susan, for being here.
Thanks, Joanne.
Eric Schumann, next, is the writer, editor, and co-producer of A Tree of Life. So he wears many hats on this film. He actually was a congregant at the Tree of Life Synagogue as a teenager. In 8th grade, he won the Intellectual Curiosity Award in middle school, and to date, this is his proudest achievement.
Oh.
Thanks, Eric. Next, I'd like to introduce Brad Orsini, who appears in the film. In 2020, he joined the Secure Community Network as the Senior National Security Advisor. This is the official safety and security organization for the Jewish community in North America. Previously, Brad served the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh as its first director of community security. He provided security training and awareness to over 16,000 people. Thank you very much, Brad, for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll hear more about that work in our conversation. And finally, I'm really honored to welcome Audrey Glickman, who also is in the film. She is the author of Pockets, The Problem with Society is in Women's Clothing, which you can find at audreyglickman.com. She is a rabbi's assistant with prior experience in nonprofits, government, advertising, and a legal secretary. A native Pittsburgher, Audrey has served on many boards and organizations, advocating for many causes, including understanding and tending to our fellow human beings. She is a survivor of the Tree of Life shooting and played the shofar beautifully in the film. Thank you, Audrey, so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate you being here. I'd like to start our conversation with a question for Trish. Your film takes on telling the story of the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in American history. And clearly this was the genesis for the film, but I'd like to hear some more about when you decided to start documenting this harrowing experience, and maybe, to tell the story of so many lives that were devastatingly and fundamentally changed. So if you could tell us, what drew you personally to this story, and when you started the project?
Well, many things drew me personally to it, but being in Pittsburgh the day of the attack, growing up near the synagogue, I was in such a state of shock that something like this could happen in Pittsburgh. Having grown up there, and feeling, very integrated, that while there are communities that are separate, it was a city of love for me. And it was, the shock of it was staggering, and the horror of it was unbelievable, that something like this could happen anywhere, but to happen where I felt safe and felt a lot of love in various communities. I immediately wanted to tell the story. I wasn't sure if I could, but I wanted to be really informed on how best to do it. And I had just finished I Am Evidence, and during that production sought trauma-informed training to really be able to speak with survivors of sexual assault. And I was also at an intersection with my elderly father, who was, we were considering, his birthday was October 25th. We were in the Catskills during the summer months. And he wanted to go home for his birthday, and we were contemplating moving him to New York. And he felt very strongly about what had happened, as I did, and doing something about it, and bearing witness to it, and telling the story in a profound way. And those that lived it should tell it, and I had relationships, and I spoke with a very close friend of mine whose parents survived Auschwitz, and we were talking about starting to document it immediately. And he sent a grant right away that allowed me to hire local camera people and to start documenting, what was happening. And we're filming the day the President Trump came to visit, and a few days prior to that, it was only, a couple of days after that he came. And so it was immediate, actually. And I knew in my heart the only way to tell the story was to tell it in a Greek chorus approach, that if it was comfortable for everyone, those that lived through it and those that had to suffer the harrowing experience of losing their loved ones, what could we learn from this? What could we learn from them, more importantly? And I sought out to do that, and wanted to bring only the best possible people that understood that intention into it. And that would be Susan and Eric. And I started with Audrey. I had a connection to Audrey, and she worked for a councilman in Pittsburgh that got the first ban on fracking in America, and we started, and she was so gracious in opening up that conversation. And through that trust, one relationship led to another. And it took time to really, you have to be patient in this process. It's not something you want to rush, because what matters most is the comfort of those telling the story. And I think, a lot of journalists rush and don't use, sometimes you would think it's common sense, but to knock at someone's door a day or two after the attacks with a box of donuts and say, I'd like to talk to you about what you just been through, which one of the participants in the film told me, I found really so insulting and offensive that, there's other ways of doing this, because you're re-traumatizing people by behaving that way. So I think it was, really wanting to shed light on the alarming rise of anti-Semitism in America and all forms of hate, that it sickens me personally. And I think these projects take several years to make, they're 3 years or more generally, and you have to want to spend time with what you care so deeply about. And I think that there's more love in the world than I think we get to see every day. And I think through this journey of the film, people had the opportunity to tell the story in the way they wanted to, and not the way others wanted to. And I felt that was crucially important in giving them agency. And we want to use the film to educate people and to bring people into the conversation of what we can do to stop things like this from ever happening again, and not only to Jews, but to all people. Everybody's affected by hate, and we have to call it out and hold people accountable for perpetrating it. And so I'm deeply committed to that. And I'm just so profoundly honored to have been a part of doing this, making this film. And I love everyone involved very much, and so, in honor of my father and everybody that's been through so much, we're here today having this conversation.
Thank you. Well, you touch on so many different aspects of the film that I hope we'll get to cover. But one thing I was very interesting choice to me was how you did focus so much on the stories of the people whose lives were affected. And I think that was a beautiful and very moving way to tell this, complex story. And they're the voices that we must remember. May his memory be a blessing is something that you bring out in the film quite often. And somehow you are just do this in such a sensitive way that you can tell people feel very comfortable and open up. See Scylla and David's story when you go and visit the florist is just really so powerful, something I can't stop thinking about. But that brings me a little bit to a question for Audrey, as one of those voices. I just want to thank you, Audrey, for being such a beautiful light in this film. And the scenes of you playing the shofar in the beginning and at the end are just so, haunting in the beginning and moving. I can imagine the process of retelling your story was very difficult. I don't know, though. So I'd like to ask you about that.
Well, it wasn't easy, but I think the first thing that I wanted to do after the shooting was over and after we'd been debriefed by the FBI and the police, and after we were taken to the central location where everyone was meeting to find out who survived, at that point, I wanted to shout. I wanted to say, this has been a hate thing. This has been somebody hating on someone. We need to do something about this. And while I was in that building, it was the Jewish Community Center in Pittsburgh. And while I was there, and while everyone was asking everyone else, who knows what, a fellow I knew from many past collaborations on many different things, who's a leader in the Black community here, came down the hall, and we just embraced each other. And pre-COVID, we embraced each other. And he said, "Were you in there?" And I said, "I was in there." But seeing him meant that somebody understood that this was hatred and this was something that we had to take action against. And that was what I needed to see and hear at that time. And that kind of grounded me to be able to go forth and try to find a way to tell the story. And I have to say, of all the many, many, many people who interviewed so many of us, working on this film has been an absolute pleasure, catharsis, a delight. The questions that we were asked, Trish comes up with wonderful interview questions we were asked, and the way we were asked and the way we put ourselves forth was absolutely the best. And hopefully our story will continue being told. That's the wonder of film, is we don't have to only do it once. There it is on film.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I know they are wonderful filmmakers, and you also, are very brave to do that, I think. And,
well, the shofar is a call to action. This is what we
yes.
want to do.
Beautiful. Eric, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it was like working on the film for you, having been a congregant there and, native of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it was a really edifying experience. When I was asked to come on, I was very excited to join the project, to help tell the story, and to facilitate the survivors and telling us their story. And, throughout, it's funny and tragic just seeing, places that I grew up in this kind of context. But throughout the process, it was always a question of just how can we tell their story better, or help them tell their story better. And that was kind of the guiding light throughout the process. And that meant, a lot of figuring out kind of what sort of historical elements to put in and to not put in. And that was I won't say a struggle, but a process throughout, in terms of kind of the history of anti-Semitism in America and in the world. And then as well, kind of the kind of like, where do we go from here sort of question, and how to calibrate that and to make it hopefully feel not preachy or anything like that, but truthful to, how, Audrey and others are experiencing, the world today.
Well, that actually segues a little bit into a question for Susan that I had, because I imagine making a film like this has many challenges on many fronts. And maybe you could tell us what some of those were and how they were overcome in the process.
Well, I think that as Eric was saying, we wanted, it's such a delicate story to tell, and we had this tremendous sense of responsibility to the survivors to tell the story in a way that they would feel comfortable with and feel proud of. And that Trish and Eric and I talked about that every day. That sense of that weight of that responsibility, and then the question of how to tell the story so that it would be accessible to a wide audience, and that how much history to put in, and but at the end of the day, really the power of the story is the humanity of the survivors and the families. That is, their testimony made it so much easier to tell an impactful and deeply affecting story, because each of them are so articulate, and Trish's approach to interviewing and kind of trauma informed approach allowed for the subjects to really bare their souls in such a profound way. Yeah, I mean, I think that we're still every day trying to think about that responsibility, and making sure that we get the film out to as wide an audience as we can, in the hopes that we can prevent something like this from ever happening again.
Well, that leads me actually to a question for Brad. And, the story is so deeply personal and universal, and there's, questions I have about that next, but preventing this from happening again. Brad, I know that's what your work is now, and maybe you can talk to us a little bit. I think you say in the film, it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. And so much of what you're doing is about preparing so that we can save lives. Hopefully it never happens here, obviously. I know, can you tell us a little bit about your goal to, prepare all the synagogues in the US
Sure. And I think
to be safe?
one thing that's so important, on the evening of October 27th, when we were dealing with the aftermath, dealing with the community, I've spent over 3 decades, almost 3 decades in law enforcement. And as an FBI agent, I was a crisis manager, and I would respond to all these violent incidents across the country. And to have this happen in the community after retiring from the FBI that I served was beyond devastating for me. And on the evening of October 27th, as Audrey said, we're in the JCC and all the families are there. And one of the survivors who's in the film as well, Steve Weiss, and his family were there, came up to me and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, I was in there and I got out. And I got out because I was trained." And I don't know how that really impacted me that evening. And I looked at Steve and said, "Steve, I don't know what to do with that information, but one day I may ask you to repeat that story so we can use what you learned in that incident, just like Audrey." And so we took a chance to interview Audrey and Steve, and then Trish comes along with a film. And in my head thinking, we need to get this word far and wide. And so the work I do now, and it's always been proactive in communities. And when I first joined Jewish Communal Security after retiring from the FBI, I used to hear people just tolerate anti-Semitism. It's just a way of life, Brad. We're used to it. And I couldn't stand that. I couldn't stand to hear people say that, because nobody has to tolerate this type of hate, incidents, and abuse from people. And so we've taken not just this film, but Audrey, Steve, and all the survivors. And I will say this to Audrey, and I say this all the time, law enforcement throughout United States and Canada knows who Audrey is, knows who Steve Weiss is, because we use these training opportunities for law enforcement and our community. And I spend a lot of time in communities now, working with communities to say, it'll never happen here. But every after action of every critical incident across the country, that's what people say. I never thought it would happen here. And so what our Jewish community doesn't hear about is the daily threats that are mitigated across the country through the work we're doing through our vast security network. Rafi Brenner is in San Francisco. He's the security director in San Francisco. He's a good partner for us. We collect, analyze that information, and helpfully mitigate threats on a daily basis. We hear about the big ones, about Pittsburgh, Poway, Jersey City, Muncie, and then what happened in January in Colleyville, Texas. And the prevailing wisdom is all these events from Pittsburgh to Colleyville, people got out because they were trained. That's the message that I hope this film, for me and the work I do and the team and the group and organization I serve, really resonates through communities all across the country, because we can't tolerate this anymore. And we need to stand up, and we need to learn, one, how to protect ourselves, two, to report all this information and be good partners with law enforcement so we can mitigate the next attack.
Thank you. Trish, I don't know if there's anything you are agreeing quite a bit, something you'd like to add to that.
No, I think with Brad, I just want everyone to know who's watching that Secure Community Network is available. They will come to where you are and do the trainings. He was just in New York City at the synagogue my husband's family goes to, and he travels all over the United States. He'll go anywhere, and I want to really urge people to get the training, any buildings, and Brad, please feel free to share whatever way they can communicate with you via website, URL, or whatever it might be. I mean, one of the tangible things with the film that we want to really hope happens is that people will see it and say, we have to get the training. And that, there's, last time I checked, there were 3,726 synagogues in the United States. And I'm trying to track how many actually have had the training, so we can keep a record of who still needs help. So we can at least do that. It's sort of like with my last film with the rape kits, it was like, you could tangibly say, okay, there's this many kits, they need to be tested. And I'm applying that same principle to the trainings, because I think it's a first step at something that we can be doing that's real and achievable. And, you know, Susan, Erica, and Audrey, and everybody in the field, we're working on a fierce education campaign to really cross over into how do we break through these barriers where people are perpetuating this awfulness. And so anything that we can be doing, we want to be doing to improve things for people. And, you know, that's why Brad is so essential to these Q&As, because it's something that it's a first step, at least, that we can encourage. So if there's information, Brad, on how people can contact you, please share that URL or whatever it might be.
Sure. So we're really easy to get a hold of, securecommunitynetwork.org. Reach out to us. We have a training site you can request. I'm about the easiest person in the Jewish community to get a hold of through my email. So please reach out to us. We're always willing, ready, and able to help any community out, any synagogue, any Jew across the country. And we're not going to stop until we train all 8 million folks of the Jewish community in the United States.
Audrey, did you have something? I, again, could see maybe there was something you wanted to.
Encouraging people, because I had the training before, and yes, it does kick in. Just reinforcing what he said.
I mean, it's really devastating that this has to happen, and it's, you know, of course, so critical and necessary. I guess it also does bring me to another point that I think is very much told in the film. You know, this is the heartbreaking story of one anti-Semitic attack on a synagogue, but it's also very universal in the way the community comes together to rise up against hate in a variety of ways. And I know Rabbi Meyer talks in the film about how one anti-Semitic attack doesn't really stop there, that it kind of breaks the walls open for more hate. And he says the attacks promote a moral decay in humanity when you're going to treat people as another and think of them as less than human, which really was impactful to me. And I wondered if Trish, Susan, anybody who'd like to respond about, you know, talking about the process of bringing this dialogue about fighting hate into the film, you know, which is, I think, an important part of the conversation.
Well, Audrey and Susan, why don't you go ahead? I want to give everybody an opportunity to share their thoughts. So,
Audrey?
she's with Rabbi Myers all the time, so she can elaborate on, you know.
I think you've
But
got this
both
one.
Rabbi Myers and Rabbi Perlman
Yes.
said similar things along those lines, and they took a kind of position of well-rooted in Jewish history, and that is the way it felt. It was not really a surprise. We were trained that this could happen. The thing that is surprising is how difficult it is, as a person who's advocated for many kinds of oppression, getting rid of many kinds of oppression throughout my life, for gay rights and all kinds of civil rights and voting rights, all kinds of things. But I've never had to advocate for ourselves. I've even advocated for Jews in Russia to free them, but never for ourselves. And that's the thing that we have to remember is the most difficult. When there's an oppressed group of people, they should not have to be the ones who are fighting for themselves. We should be taking care of each other. And in fact, that's what happened in Pittsburgh. I'm very proud to live here in Pittsburgh, although I'm sure San Francisco is similar, because we all came together. It was seamless. People didn't care who was who. We all came together.
Thank you. Susan, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it was it's been a very kind of emotional journey for me, because two of my previous recent films, The Rape of Recy Taylor, about a Black sharecropper who was gang raped by 6 white boys and never received justice. And a film that actually received a wonderful grant from San Francisco Jewish Film Institute, A Crime on the Bayou, about a Black teen who was imprisoned for touching the arm of a white boy. And a crime, yeah. So in both of these cases, you know, there justice, you know, getting to a place of justice was a tremendous struggle. And in the case of Recy Taylor, it never happened, as I said. So, you know, to be dealing with a shooting that was, you know, against my own people, because I'm, you know, Jewish and, you know, part of a congregation myself in New York, you know, that in the present times, not in 1944 or 1967, respectively, was that's you know, really close to home, and distressing. But it's the same forces that were acting against Recy Taylor and Gary Duncan and the, you know, Tree of Life attack, forces of white supremacy. And you know, it's important to see that connection and to see that you know, to understand that unless we can work together across communities to fight against that oppression, that hatred, we will, you know, our very democracy and our lives are at stake.
Brad, I don't know if you have something you'd like to end with. Let us know that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, I just again want to thank Trish, Susan, and Eric for taking on this challenge, because it is helpful for our community. And I think, you know, as divisive as our country is now, unfortunately, and I don't want to be the downer. I think sometimes things are going to get worse before they get better. So it's important for affected communities to really grab hold of this issue that we're faced with. And I'm a security guy. I'm a law enforcement, and I just so want people to understand how impactful this training can be, not just at their shul, not just at their workplace, but in their everyday life. And I want to keep people safe. And that's really our mission. And I thank Trish every time I talk to her for continuing on. And I am so happy to be with you all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Eric, and a last statement you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, I just wanted to, you know, kind of echo what was being said, that you know, people who hate Jews don't just hate Jews, and people who hate, you know, Black people don't just hate Black people. And that I think the only solution around this is to, you know, understand that, you know, marginalized groups everywhere are oppressed, and we can, the only way to lift ourselves up is to lift everybody up. And so that, you know, if you're on the street fighting anti-Semitism, you should also be on the street fighting Black hatred and Asian hatred, and I think that that's doubly important now, especially
Mhm.
with the world we're living in. I just I just can't can echo that enough. Embrace people as they fully are, and don't ask them to come into your community as you want them to be as well.
Thank you.
That is our job as Jews, in fact.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Trish, I'll leave it with you.
Oh,
Unless you are, I know,
no,
everybody's
build,
so
what
powerful.
Pittsburgh has a lot of our bridges, and building bridges instead of walls is always so poetic to me. Just having an open heart and not judging people. And if you don't have any experience, it's sort of really, tragic to not, take time to be thoughtful and caring for each other. It's really easy to do. And to intervene when people are in a struggle and they're getting exposed to hateful ways of being, and that's why the power of the film in schools and every place we can take it will be so helpful for people, that they'll have this tool to teach children. Like one of the things in the film, there's a clip, actually Eric found it, of this mother to asking her young children, who do we hate? And they say who they hate. And the boy saying, he wasn't sure if he hated Jews, but he knew that he should say Jews. Like it was almost like the way he answered was a question. And I think that's really where it can begin. And that's where it's so dangerous. So everybody plays a role in helping make all of us connected. And even though sometimes it's painful and disturbing and outrageous, and just taking that time to really talk with someone, about what they're going through can maybe help someone see the way better. And the divisiveness is there are bridges, and I really believe that. I've had conversations with people that I never thought would say I was that guy. I didn't realize, I'm sorry, this really helped me. So I do believe there's an opportunity. I'm not a fatalist. I'm not just going to give up and stick my head in the sand. Like, this is our response to this. And, I say this often, by sharing a lens into the lives of others, we give a perspective and an opportunity to have a conversation. And someone hasn't had the experience of different people in their lives, now they can. And it's up to everyone as an adult to really play a role in that. So I encourage that in every opportunity. And just thank you for the venue that you're giving people to see the film, and to all of us to be here with you and embrace this opportunity, because it is a very powerful thing, art. And sometimes I don't think we realize, but you don't have to have a lifetime. You see a film in 90 minutes and say, wow. I mean, we had someone, Susan and I were talking to someone last week who said he forgot about what happened to Tree of Life. He said, oh yeah, I forgot about this, and I was like, wow, I couldn't, and he really knows about this issue. And he was, it was kind of reinforced and why we made it, to me, to keep the story alive and keep people engaged, and that keep our guards up and keep our hearts open. And I think we are going to do, we can and will do better. I believe that in my heart. I really do.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your film with us and with our audience, and that we can play some small role in helping you spread the word. We really appreciate that. And I just got a note here that you can follow the film on social media at A Tree of Life doc. We thank you all so much for your time tonight to have this conversation. It's really meaningful, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne.
Thank you.
Thanks to the festival as well.
Thank you, Susan.
Good night, everyone.